Hi, I'm Priscilla Robinson. I'm a Clackamas County Master Gardener, and I have loved growing and eating tomatoes my whole life. In fact, tomatoes are one of the most popular crops among home gardeners, and with good reason. Not only are tomatoes delicious, nutritious, and versatile, there are hundreds of tomato varieties to suit every climate, garden site, and taste. Some have been developed by the Oregon State University with disease resistance and well suited to our Pacific Northwest weather. Let's discover what tomato will meet your needs and thrive in your garden setting. The taste of a homegrown, vine-ripened fruit. That makes the tomato America's favorite garden vegetable. And as you can see, I was in the garden in my happy place with my granddaughter, Eliana. She ran down the row and pulled off a nice ripe tomato and popped it into her mouth. Notice that spurt of juice and seeds all over her t-shirt. That wasn't the only tomato she ate that day. Here is a hefty list of objectives for today's webinar. As you read over these objectives, please use the lens that today's webinar is going to take you from selecting the best tomato starts for your needs and the gardening space that you'll need, and then it'll help you through the summer with proven cultural practices and monitoring for the health of your plants. This is just to brush up and get ready to get those tomato plants in the ground in May. So the first step is selecting what type of variety that you want. And I've broken it down by genetics, growth pattern, and shape. How are you going to use the tomato? That's important to know. Are you going to be slicing it? Will you chop it and put it in salads or salsas? How about putting it in the lunchbox? Are your tomatoes for canning or juicing or even drying? Is resistance to diseases, the stresses of the plant on the plant, or other disorders, are they an important consideration for you? That might be, especially if you have experienced problems in the past. So genetics is first, heirlooms. Many gardeners continue growing old-fashioned heirloom varieties that have been favorites because of their exceptional flavor or unusual appearance. Heirloom varieties are open-pollinated, handed down from generations, and the seeds will produce the same plant as the parent plant. Also within genetics, you want to look at hybrids. Hybrids are cross-pollinated for better disease resistance and higher yields. Seed production is not true to the original plant and may sacrifice flavor. This photo features a Clackamas County Master Gardener at one of our programs called Grow an Extra Row, Learning and Giving Garden. On this 1-acre garden, we trial all sorts of vegetables and tomatoes. Last year, our team of gardeners grew and donated over 4,000 pounds of vegetables, and 927 pounds of that were our tomatoes. So growing tomatoes is one of our things, and that's where I've gained a lot of experience. Growth pattern is another important part of picking a tomato. And that means how much space do you have to grow your tomato may be the determining factor for which growth pattern you choose. On the left are indeterminate tomato plants. At Grow an Extra Row, our indeterminate plants tower over our heads by late July. The indeterminate plant have a higher overall yield. Look at the picture on the left. Those are big, beautiful tomatoes in a big, sturdy tomato cage. That cage is 5 feet tall and 3 feet square. The indeterminate tomatoes are strategically pruned to optimize production. That's what's happening in this picture. We're doing some pruning. Indeterminates grow with a vine habit, so they grow up, up, up. Throughout the growing season, you will see flowers, fruit setting, and fruit ripening. as the plant develops. Indeterminate tomatoes are great at providing delicious fruits throughout the growing season. Well cared for indeterminate varieties keep growing and producing until killed by frost. On the right-hand side, we're talking about the determinate growth pattern. It's shorter, bushier, and it has lots of branches. With some varieties, the entire crop will ripen in 1 to 2 weeks. That's excellent for canning when you want to get it all done at one time. This growth pattern is very good for growing in pots on a patio as well. Minimal staking is necessary, but master gardeners encourage you to stake even your indeterminate plants so they stay upright in the wind or if someone bumps into them. The flavor in most determinate varieties is described as robust and delicious. Some growers have developed tabletop tomato plants that grow in a very compact manner like this one up on top. If you're short on space, a determinate growth pattern is the way to go. The shape of the fruit may also be a determining factor. How do you want to eat it? Think about that. The shape and the ripening habits of the tomato will affect how you utilize and eat your harvests. Now let's look at a bunch of different types of shapes. The first one are cherry tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes are magnificent for their variety of shapes, sizes, and flavors. And I usually have at least 2 or 3 cherry tomatoes in my garden just so I can have that diverse tomato growing. A helpful hint is they can be harvested in bunches, like a bunch of grapes. You remove a whole cluster of ripe tomatoes. I find this method of harvesting prevents the bursting of the delicious, juicy orbs, and it is much quicker. By far, the sun gold is a must in my garden and will produce until the cool weather sets in. The next are the globe-shaped tomatoes, and look how they are substantial but more baseball-sized. And these varieties have been raised to hold up and usually travel well. So this is a really good overall tomato to have in your garden. Here is, whoops, sorry. Here is the pink Berkeley tie-dye, and it's a gorgeous beefsteak tomato, and it is prized for its development, color, and flavor. The indeterminate vine of the beefsteak takes some pruning, which you will learn more about in a little while. And here are the paste tomatoes. And this one is called Little Napoli, and it's ready in about 60 to 65 days. So if you have a short growing season, this might be a Roma style to put in your garden. What's really neat is many of these paste tomatoes are comfortable growing in a container. So that's very good. Some of them are compact and have a determinate growth pattern with large flushes of fruit. It's perfect for cooking into a sauce. And the bright crimson oval tomatoes are meaty and dense with a rich, tangy flavor. These dual-use tomatoes are also ideal in salads. So now here are some of the different cherry tomatoes, and I just want to have you look. If you see a plus sign in front of a tomato on any of these next pages, that means that it is determinate. All others are indeterminate. And if you see the double asterisk following it, that is one that has been developed by Oregon State University with traits for earlier harvests, reliable in cool and cloudy climates. All right. So here's a basket of tomatoes that my sister and I grew in containers, and they fed our body and soul the summer of 2020 when everything was shut down. It filled our hearts as we tended and harvested tasty vine-ripened treats. The oblong cherry tomatoes are called lipstick, and they are super tasty and delicious. Many of the varieties were indeterminate, so we pruned them regularly to maintain a manageable patio garden. The featured tomato here in the outlined in white is called the Côte de Boeuf, and it's a very reliable tomato that we grow an extra row every year. This curious and striking tomato is guaranteed to turn heads as well as satisfy your appetites. Its name simply is Italian for ox heart. They can measure up to 4 inches by 5 inches and weigh over a half a pound each. It's one of the tastiest saucing types of tomato because of its dense flesh and beautiful orangey red skin. This tomato takes about 85 days. It is an indeterminate producing tomato. It can be sliced for salads and sandwiches. The round picture shows a fresh vegetable soup that I make every summer. And when I miss a few tomatoes and they're a little overripe, I throw them into my soup and they break down to make a beautiful, rich broth. Many varieties of globe or slicers are ready in 70 to 75 days. So what does that mean? So when we talk about days, remember that's the days until harvest. That's when you start counting when the tomato plant goes in the ground. The luscious ruby red slicer outlined in white is the result of a cross between the Brandywine and the Castelluto Genovese. This fusion produces beautiful, slightly squat, globe-shaped tomatoes with the most delectable flavor. They are indeterminate plants. So by crossing two beloved heirlooms together, the cultivar bears the best qualities of both parent varieties with the added benefits of hybrid vigor, uniformity, and yield. Beefsteak tomatoes are the Goliath of tomatoes. These beefsteak tomatoes are plenty big enough for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Eaten with basil and garlic, they are scrumptious raw or roasted. The fruit easily reaches 4 to 7 inches across or larger, and the brilliant orange fruit are rich, meaty, and full of flavor. Indeterminate plants have an open, rambling habit, so have a sturdy staking method in place. Sturdy is the key term for the cage as well, so you don't lose your plants at the peak of production. Please remember that these plants are going to demand space and as much sun as possible if you want your best harvest. So here are some of the resources that I used thus far. And if you were hoping to learn more about starting your tomatoes from seeds, then you'll want to, after this, go on to clicking this link for our Tomatoes 1. Here, this is another outstanding, excuse me, resource with information on tomatoes at all different stages. All of this is from universities and is science-based. All right, so you're gonna buy a tomato transplant. Here's a little bit of advice. Once you've decided on the tomato type that you will plant, you will need to purchase that start. You'll want to look for dark green leaves and stems and about as wide as it is tall, nice sturdy central stem, grown in an individual container. Look closely at these leaves. Make sure to check the top and the bottoms and the underneath. Make sure it's free of insects and signs of disease. Perhaps you're going to choose to purchase a 6-pack of tomato plants. That's okay. That means your plant is not going to be big and robust like this. So what are you going to do? Well, you are going to pot up. It's a practice of repotting that small tomato plant you bought from the garden center into a series of ever larger pots while you are waiting for the soil in your garden to get warm enough and dry enough to put them in their forever home. Seedlings can be repotted or potted up as they grow and develop. When potting up, each time the stems are buried in the plant. So you're going to take off these bottom leaves and you're going to put it into a pot right up there. I'm pointing to where you're going to want to plant it. It'll look like, oh my gosh, that plant hasn't done anything, but you just keep potting it up. That by potting it up, the stems are buried and their adventitious roots start to develop. That's the little hair that you see on the side of the stems. Those will actually become roots. Every couple or every 3 weeks, repot your tomato into a slightly larger pot, not a huge pot. They do like to feel that, that pressure, so don't put it right into a giant pot. And every time you do so, pick off those lower leaves, as I mentioned earlier. The roots will grow and along there, and this is going to make a much stronger, robust tomato plant. It's going to be ready to really do great things. So you might go to the garden center and see a poor little tomato that is reaching out, pick me, I need some help. No, don't do it. These tall, lanky plants are already been stressed out and are susceptible to disease or just pure failure. They also might be root bound. And how do you figure that out? Well, you just kind of pop them out of the pot a little bit and just look and see how the root development is going. If you see something like this, pick a different garden center or nursery and find one that has roots that are developing. All right, I talked about your best location is going to be at least 8 hours of sun, nice loamy, well-drained soil, and protection from wind and not in a low spot in your property. Those low spots tend to be cool and are not going to give you the proper growing conditions that plants need to be vigorous. And so if you have a location in mind on your property, do a little research. And that means looking at the sun exposure in the morning, the noon, and the afternoon. Your smartphone actually has a compass on it. So why not use that compass to figure out how the sun is, the direction of your house, and then how the sun is going to affect it. Look for a footprint that does not have a lot of shade, like here, the shade of the house or shade of the tree. It might be a neighbor's fence that is a problem. A sun-starved tomato plant will put its energy into growing and reaching for the sun and not into flowering and fruiting. And speaking of soil, what is soil? That's what Eliana was saying. What is this stuff? Well, it's a combination of 25% air, 25% water, 5% organic matter, and 45% minerals and particles of rock. In the mix are an army of microorganisms that help in the distribution of nutrients. It is highly recommended for gardeners of all experience levels to test their soil for pH early in the growing season. Most vegetable plants like soil to be in that neutral range, 6.2 to 7.5, to absorb nutrients from water most efficiently. Remember, Clackamas County Master Gardeners provides this service 3 times a year. So is the soil ready? Is your garden soil ready to plant yet? So you can do a couple of things. This on the left is called the squeeze test. You just grab some soil and squeeze it together. If it comes together in a hard ball, if there's water dripping between your fingers, it is too wet, and this is not a good time to be planting. Cold soil is wet soil. On the right is the same squeeze test, but guess what? This soil is just right. We picked up a squeeze full of it, and when we opened it, it broke off easily. There wasn't any water dripping from it. Another thing you want to do is evaluate your soil. If you've moved into a new house or have a new garden bed at a community center, you might want to send it to a lab for professional testing to see what the components are before you start amending that soil. But you can also just do a simple pH test. That's a great first start. The last thing is your soil, not the air. Well, the air too, but the soil really needs to be the right temperature, and that's at least 60 degrees. So yes, take its temperature. If you want to warm your soil to try and get things going, if the air temperature has been good, you can use a variety of plastic mulch to warm your soil. And tomatoes are a warm season crop, unlike maybe lettuce, cilantro, pak choi, which enjoy the cooler temperatures. Tomatoes like it warm and hot. To time your planting, a scientific system called degree days will track temperature accumulation of day and night. It quantifies what it means ready to plant. OSU has a great source on this page right down here if you want to start tracking those degree days. Otherwise, you can just utilize a local seed company chart like this one, where it says May to June is the time to plant your tomatoes outside. This one over here, some people say, oh no, I can do it in March. No, that's for planting your seeds. So you do, rule of thumb is that you want to plant your tomatoes in the Willamette Valley after Mother's Day. A word to the wise, you are going to be seeing tomato plants show up at the garden centers. And don't be tricked by these big box stores or the growers. They just want to move their inventory. They start to put the tomatoes out when they've got them finished in their greenhouse. So unless you have a greenhouse for these tomatoes to go into, do not purchase them early. You are risking disease, and putting them in the ground. You're not set up for success. The only reason you'd want to grow them earlier is if you get a 6-pack and you want to pot them up. But still, where are you going to put those babies? So you might want to put them in your garage. You might want to put them on a very sunny south side of your house. But if you buy tomato plants early, word to the wise, they don't like the cold. All right, so now we are moving to the point where we are going to be planting these tomatoes. And there are two methods that are very, very good that the OSU recommends. The first one is the trench. And in the early season, the advantage is that there's warmer soil at the surface, and that will help these roots to develop and it will speed the growth. The disadvantage or caution is in the summertime, the roots may dry out a little bit faster. So you'll want to do some moisture saving methods, which we'll talk about. Here's the vertical one. The disadvantage is in the early season, if you're digging a big deep hole, possibly even, I don't know, 18 inches. That's how big they are at Grow an Extra Row. We use a post hole digger to dig those holes. The soil is a little bit cooler in those big deep holes, and so the initial growth can be slowed down a little bit. But the big advantage is during the summer, those deep roots have an opportunity to draw water. And here's just a photograph of what it looks like. Notice how all these leaves have been removed from this plant, and all of that stem material is going to be covered. You might want to put a small support right at the tip to keep that tomato plant up off the ground. You'll also want to stake it at the point where the tomato is going to be growing. And here's the vertical method. This is where you dig that deep hole, at least 12 inches deep, And then again, you have removed a lot of these leaves from the stem, and all of that is going to grow extra roots underground. All right, so you think you're ready to grow your tomatoes and put your tomatoes in the ground. You've double checked your soil's ready, your day temps are 60 to 70, the night temps are above 50, your shovel is sharp, you've got the right plants, but wait, there is a hardening off process that needs to happen. If you don't have a greenhouse, just park your little babies close to the south side of the house or the garage and start hardening them off. So we'll go through that. Okay, so hardening off is the process of weaning your baby tomatoes off the nice warm growing conditions in the nursery greenhouse where they were growing very happily. Now we want to get them ready to grow in outdoor conditions. Wind, sun, all of those things are not in the greenhouse, and we have to get them ready. Hardening off is the process of exposing the plant to the outdoor environment gradually. Most likely, your plants need, let's see, at first you want to start with an hour, then a little, and then longer in the shade, then maybe some dappled sun for a couple of hours, then dappled sun, and then some full sun, and then longer until all day is achieved. But remember, these plants will need protection at night or in bad weather. If you have a really stormy, rainy, cold day, you can put the hardening off on hold for a day or two if the weather gets bad. The whole process will take 2 weeks. And just think, while you're hardening off, your soil is continuing to gradually warm up. Okay, when you want warming days and nights, the soil is warm and the plants have gone through the hardening process, then planting your tomato out in the garden is what you want to start doing. So decide which method you're going to use, trench or vertical, dig your holes, space your plants at least 2 to 3 feet apart in rows that are 4 to 5 feet apart. You'll want to add amendments to the holes, such as 1/4 cup of lime and then maybe some magnesium and some fertilizer. A 1-2-1 fertilizer is recommended. You could also use a 1-2-2 fertilizer. You want to work that into the soil. Make sure that your tomato plant is fully hydrated before you put it in the hole. And one way that I do that is I have a 5-gallon bucket, and I fill it with water and a little bit of quarter strength water soluble fertilizer. I place the entire pot into and submerge it under the water, watch the bubbles rise, and when the bubbles stop, I know it is fully saturated. Then you want to set that plant aside for maybe 5 minutes just to let extra water drip out, and then you're ready to put it in the ground. Remember to plan ahead. You're going to need stake and supports for your plant. There are a lot of different options: cages, fences, metal rods, PVC pipes, wooden stakes, but just make sure whatever you pick is going to be sturdy. You want these big tomato plants to be well supported, like the one in the picture on the right. All right, so ways to support it. First, once the tomatoes go right in the ground, you put in a nice sturdy stake and attach it. The reason behind supporting plants is to increase that sunlight. You want it, to be up and big and get lots of sunlight. So having it supported allows it to branch out and grow really big. You also want to tie it to the main stake. And in here you can see that there's a figure 8. And what this does is it actually creates a little buffer here so that your tomato plant is not rubbing directly against that wooden stake, causing any damage to the stem. If you damage the stem, you're looking for trouble with diseases. Let's disease get into the plant. There are a variety of ways to support the tomatoes. Here is shown is ladders and trellis, and it's important that you do some pruning when you have plants growing in these types of supports. Here are some more different methods. And actually, all of these are beautiful and can create a lot of interest in your garden. It doesn't have to be just the plain old tomato cage. Make your garden as beautiful as it is delicious. So here's a big sturdy tomato cage. And look, these are being grown in grow bags. And here is a custom made PVC um, uh, stake and a cage. So just make sure that you have something ready at the time of planting. Can you imagine what this plant must have looked like when it first went in? It probably looked really tiny and like, oh, there's no way it's going to grow into that cage. It will. Okay, and here now this is the same group planting tomatoes. They've got their stakes in, they've got their tomatoes in, and now they place the cages over at the time of planting. You'll notice this one came with a little bamboo stake, and that one is going to maybe be necessary for the first week or two as the tomato gets its, it adapts to living in the bigger ground, and you can remove that easily afterwards. Okay, you're going to want to plan to fertilize. Tomatoes are heavy feeders, and OSU recommends, as I said, a 1-to-1 ratio, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. This nitrogen is the low number. We want to support growth, but we really want to support this middle number, the flowers and the fruit. That's what's going to give us what we want to eat. And also the last one is good for root growth. And it's important that these tomatoes continue to grow and develop their roots throughout the growing season. Please note if you're going to use an organic fertilizer, that is fine, but it actually should be applied at least 1 to 2 months earlier so that the components have time to activate in the soil. So here is our checklist for fertilizing. At least 1 month before, you want to put some compost or fertilizer into your garden, 2 months if it's organic. When the fruit sets and pollination is completed, you want to again fertilize it again. And this side dressing method is that you're just going to pull back the mulch or whatever is covering around your tomato plant, place the fertilizer on all sides of the plant the best you can, and then replace the mulch. And so you might not find a fertilizer bag that says 1-to-1. You might find one that says 2-4-2. Well, that is the same ratio, just a higher concentration. And here are some of the resources that were used for this gardening. And I want to give attention to these 2 books. This one talks about growing in containers or grow bags. That's very interesting. And this one, even though it's an oldie, it's a goodie. If you have a raised bed, this book really will help you with your spacing and how to organize your raised beds for optimum production. All right, so good reasons for mulching. You retain moisture, you deter weeds, you regulate soil temperature. But when are you going to mulch? It's very important that you allow your soil to warm up for at least 2 to 4 weeks. You can take the temperature before you place the mulch on top. If you place the mulch on top of cold soil, that will just insulate it and keep the soil cool. And that's not what you want for growing good roots. And here are different types of mulches that are all successful. And this is a garden nicely mulched. Here is the use of black plastic and the red plastic. It's very important that these plastics are put in at the time of planting or soon, yeah. So you're growing on your patio, that's great. Get the biggest pot that you can handle. 4 to 5 gallons is going to be a nice size pot. Make sure it has good drainage. You'll want to give it consistent watering and at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. Remember, these tomatoes are in a pot. They rely on you for everything that they need, water, nutrition, everything. So they're going to have a little bit of extra care and make sure, like I said, the container is big enough. Yeah. And these are lovely balcony or patio tomato varieties. Notice that they're all determinate. So that means they're going to just grow to a certain size and then stop. So don't think there's anything wrong with your your tomato plant. The balcony and patio friendly tomatoes are important to consider if you're gardening in just a small space. The growers have developed plants that are super compact, determinate, and they only grow to a certain size. This Sunrise Sauce is a hybrid and claims to be the perfect patio tomato. Has low maintenance and it's very tasty and ready in 55 to 60 days. That's pretty great. And this Beaver Lodge, I thought was a very interesting tomato that I've grown. And it is a globe tomato and it grows in a very compact manner. So it's great for my raised beds. But the other thing is it has a tendency to creep a little bit. So you could actually put this into a hanging basket. So that's another cool thing. And it was developed in Alberta, Canada for the cool conditions. It's ready in 55 days. So potted plants can sometimes have stress, and this one is drought stress and too small of a pot stress. So this is a little tiny, I don't even think it's a 1-gallon pot. And maybe it was purchased in this pot and never got transplanted or put in the ground. This is pretty discouraging if you're putting a lot of work into your garden. So make sure that you don't stress it out with too little water or too small of a pot. And it's surprising that at a Master Gardener workshop last summer that many participants had never heard of pruning their tomato plants. Well, the tomatoes pictured on the left are in desperate need of pruning. They're over the head and taller than the cages. Determinate tomatoes don't have to be pruned too much unless they are damaged or diseased on their leaves or branches, or if a branch is just simply in the way and you're on your patio. When you prune the tomato plant, you will want to be careful not to, you'll want to be careful to note that the plant has structures like the growing tip, the suckers, and the flower clusters. What are you going to cut off? So make sure that you're looking at those structures carefully. And here's just some simple pruning. Suckers being removed. And these lower branches, any of the lower branches below the first set of flowers should come off. Here's the Missouri pruning, and this takes off just part of the sucker. And the idea here is to reduce damage down here at the stem. So that is a proven method for pruning. This root pruning is done towards the end of the season. And basically you're cutting off the roots of the plant, and that is forcing it to ripen up. It's giving a message, time to get these tomatoes grown so we'll have some seeds. In top pruning, you remove all growth above the cage or at least 5 to 6 feet. That stops this new growth will also, stopping this new growth will also hasten the ripening. When you are doing this, be cautious not to expose the developing fruit to the direct sunlight. This top pruning is important towards the end of the season. It's even okay, painful, but okay, to remove those late flowers and even some of the small fruit that start to grow at the end or the middle of August. They're not going to ripen unless they're a cherry tomato variety. So just remove them and put your energy into the developing fruit. So here's your checklist for pruning before we get into the particulars. Yeah. And here are some cultural practices that we have gone over, good resources. And the tomato is self-pollinating. It has all the same male and female parts on its flower. One of the problems might be blossom drop or few or no flowers. And these two problems can be caused by the environment, temperatures, or lack of sun. So manage your plant for better health and fruit. So you need to know about the disease triangle. We've got pathogens, we've got the genetics, and then we've got the environment. And this is what it looks like. So the host plants, if they've been selectively bred, they might have tomato resistant, they might be tomato resistant for disease. Check the seed packets for that or the plant label. Crop rotation is very important. You can manage your plant's health and get better tomato production by interrupting the disease triangle. If you plant tomatoes over and over and over again in the soil, then you are going to have a buildup of pathogens, and then those pathogens will damage your plants. And then the environment, let's look at that. So here are some environmental solutions. Here in the Pacific Northwest, fungal diseases are early and late blight and are quite common. Other parts of the country may experience bacterial or viral diseases. Oddly enough, the coping strategy is very similar for almost all cases. Monitor your plants frequently, and when you see a leaf that appears discolored or sick, carefully cut it off to prevent that problem from spreading in the plant or to other plants. It's important to toss it in the garbage. Do not compost it, or you'll spread the pathogen in your compost. Soil number, photo number 1, I took when I was walking around the community garden, and these tomatoes and plants were just left to rot right there. That's not a way to compost. That should have been cleaned up and moved away. Keep your garden clean and remove all debris. Oh, darn it. Sorry. In photo number 2, look how these raised beds are nicely separated. This is a perfect way to do crop rotation, moving your plants. So if you have tomatoes in this bed, the next year you'll put them over there. And we're talking about all nightshades, so potatoes, eggplant, all of those. Those should be rotated and not go to the same bed year after year. In photo number 3, we have nice, healthy soil. And in 4, get your soil pH tested, because if your plant is struggling with and it doesn't have good pH, it's more likely to be susceptible to the pathogens that are in the air or in the soil. And here are some disorders. and this can be prevented by watering more on a regular basis. This sun scald can be avoided by not pruning too hard. This is blossom end rot. There are some types of plants that are just, or tomatoes are more susceptible to it. So maybe you just don't grow those ones, but inconsistent watering can also cause that. This cat face is abnormal flower development or possible herbicide exposure. Here's a picture of late blight. This is an airborne fungus. And so if you're in a community garden, that's really hard sometimes. And then green shoulders were just caused by high temperatures. Here are some common leaf disorders and diseases. For bugs, you just want to look for the chewing or maybe the bug poop, the frass. Um, Spotted things, this doesn't look good, cut it off. This is just a wind or excessive heat exposure. This should be monitored. Don't start cutting off all those branches. Water it and just monitor. They usually come back after the heat wave. But this is a freakish type of leaf curl and probably had some exposure to an herbicide. And here are some great resources for disorders and diseases. So is this a disorder? No, this is kind of just a normal part of homegrown tomatoes, and it's called a blossom scar. Is this a disorder? No, this is at grow an extra row, and this is what we want our tomatoes to be doing at this point. The energy is going into the development of these tomatoes and ripening, and the plant just knows not to put energy into leaves anymore. It's even happening here. It's a normal development. Don't worry about it. Hot weather solutions, be sure to mulch heavily. You can even erect a shade cloth. If you want something substantial like this, word to the wise, have that frame put in before you start growing the tomatoes. I couldn't imagine trying to put that frame in after. This shade cloth can keep the sun off during real big heat waves. And harvesting your tomatoes, it's really important to just keep harvesting your tomatoes. That prompts your plant to keep ripening the other ones. And use pruners or scissors to snip them off so that you don't damage your stem. And at the season, just harvest all your tomatoes and set them aside in a single layer. You could put them in a box, you could put them on a tray. They can go in your garage, your counter. They don't need sunlight, they just need warmth. And so here is your checklist. What are you going to do to get ready for planting tomatoes in your garden? Here's your checklist for your seasonal care of tomatoes. And we're not going anywhere. If you have questions or need help with your tomatoes, please go ahead and contact our helpline or call us, send us photographs of your problems. And I think we're getting ready for some questions.
Okay, now you can hear me. Sorry about that.
No
I
worries.
tell you, that was so good, Priscilla. You know, every time I watch a tomato presentation, I learn something new. And this time I learned about, I pruned my tomatoes last year because I never do, but I thought, okay, I'm going to do it this time. Well, I pruned my determinants. And I now I learned only prune the indeterminate tomatoes. So thank you so much for that. But we do have a
Yeah.
few questions. Um, Someone wanted to know, you talked about top pruning. When do you do the top pruning? What time during the tomato stages?
Usually by the end of July, the beginning of August, the tomatoes are really starting to outgrow their cage. And there also may be those, like the beefsteak tomatoes are starting to throw flowers at the beginning of August. Those are never going to create a substantial tomato. So but the short answer is sort of the beginning of August, at least here in the Pacific Northwest, because we need to be mindful of how our growing season is really only going to go until maybe mid-September if we're lucky, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so that would be
Great.
my answer. And be selective. I like to prune a little, step back and see, is this branch in the way? Oh, there's some flowers or whatever. So take your time, enjoy
Yeah,
it.
that's a great idea to not do it all at once. Step back and take a look and see what you're doing. Perfect
Yeah.
idea. Yeah,
And
thank you.
like you might want to somehow mark with a little flag or something that those are determinate tomatoes and you're not going to prune those. Maybe tie it onto the tomato cage.
Sounds good. You talked a lot about hardening off, which was great, but this person wants to know if the process of hardening off would be the same if you're using a cold frame to harden off.
Oh, great question. No, the cold frame is essentially like a greenhouse, and that cold frame
Mhm.
is closed. So if they're just talking about opening the glass or plastic level and then it's getting exposure, that would kind of be like hardening off. But if you're able, put your tomatoes in a tray so that you can lift them out of your cold frame so that they also get exposed to the wind. That rocking actually helps them to develop roots. It tells them, hey, I need stronger foundation, and they'll actually start growing more roots. So a cold frame is a great place to put them at the end of the day to protect those little babies as they're growing and developing.
Oh, great. Okay, good. I didn't think about the wind thing and having it sturdy. That's great. That's great information. Now you didn't talk about planting seeds because that's a whole nother
It's a
webinar.
whole
Um,
webinar.
yeah,
Tomatoes
but
one.
if this person did plant, she saved her seeds and then she's planting them, and she wants to know, are all the seeds she saved going to come true? Is she going to get the exact same tomato or not? How do you know which ones to save and which ones not to save?
Okay, so the tomatoes that you want to save are your heirloom tomatoes. Those are what they call true. The
Okay,
hybrids, which are a combination of genetic material, um, will start to um, branch out again. So like if it had sweet tomatoes and sour tomatoes and the mother was a sweet tomato, the seeds might have sour tomato traits. So it's recommended to just save your heirloom tomato seeds and to um, have that well marked.
okay, that sounds perfect. Um, is there any way to take a root bound tomato when you're getting ready to transplant it? How, if it's really root bound, is there a good way to get it unroot bound and will it still survive okay?
Okay, so a root bound plant, you can finesse it, and that might involve actually cutting off some of the bottom roots and then teasing out the side roots, and then potting it up and planting a substantial amount of the stem to stimulate new root growth. Also, that root bound plant should maybe get some liquid fertilizer to promote growth of the roots, and so it'll recover from that.
Okay,
What do you
okay.
think, Jane? How do you handle a root bound plant
Um,
when you pick
No,
one
you're
up?
right. Yeah, you can, like you said, just finesse it around, and especially if it's circling, we know we always spread out so that it doesn't circle. No, I think that's perfect.
Yes, that
Um,
circling just keeps it in that same
right.
shape. So sometimes
Yeah,
even trimming those off too. I think
yeah,
we get a lot of root bound plants when we go to a big box store. And if we're not checking, we still want to use it. So I think that was
yeah,
a great question. Thank you.
yeah. Well, thank you for the answer. Um, Now over a full season. So this person wants to know if an indeterminate or a determinate will give you more production over the whole season.
Okay, so the hybrid determinants are being bred for higher production. That's good. But a big, robust
Indeterminate?
indeterminate is just going to keep producing and producing and producing. I start getting cherry tomatoes by almost, oh, I don't know, maybe the end of June, and I can keep getting them if we haven't had a killing frost until October. So that's an indeterminate plant, and I picked a lot of tomatoes. So I would say that the indeterminate is going to give you more poundage.
It sounds good. Thank you for that. I was just reading, ask a couple more questions here. This person said, for gardeners with back issues and limited mobility, what tomato growing methods reduce the bending and the repeated, repetitive strain on their back?
Oh, that's great. I didn't have a picture in this particular webinar, but I grow at a community garden where they actually have the planters are hip high. And I have seen people successively grow a determinate tomato. So that tomato is going to grow 3 feet. So 3 feet from your hip up, the person can do it in the standing position. And so I would get a raised container or a raised bed so that you reduce the bending. And yeah, I've even seen a woman in her wheelchair with these sort of hip high um, garden beds, and they just used the determinate ones. So that would be a suggestion. And there's so
Yeah,
many good ones out there. There's cherries, there's globe. I think there's even a few beefsteak that have that determinate growing pattern, a smaller, lower pattern. They certainly don't want it 6 feet tall.
yeah. And I went to a master gardener demonstration garden, and they had legs so the people could go underneath the table with their wheelchairs or sit on a chair with their legs underneath, and then the containers or the raised bed was above it, so that they
Mm,
didn't have to stand up the whole time. They were able to sit down and just actually work with the tomatoes. So there's a lot of ideas out there
yeah.
for
And
that.
some of those early raised beds weren't very substantial. They weren't deep enough to grow
Yeah,
tomato plants, but they have changed. They've gotten better, like you mentioned, where, it really drops down and then there's, spots. So,
yeah.
look at a raised bed.
Okay. And we have time for one more question. You didn't talk too much about wall of waters. What is your idea, your opinion of a wall of water?
So a wall of water is a season extender, and that means that you can get your plant into the ground earlier. I would still want my soil to be at least, 60 degrees or better. But the wall of water is installed at the time you plant your small tomato plant. Um, how do you describe it? It's like tubes, and you fill those tubes with water, and then during the day, the tubes are exposed to the warm weather or the sun, and those warm up, and water does not cool down very quickly, and it
Ah,
will actually give that heat to the tomato plant. So I think that it is a way to extend your season, especially if you want to get them in early or you have plants that absolutely need to go in. Um, my advice is buying the largest wall of water you can get. I've seen some that, are not very big, and
wow.
it's like, how long are you going to be able to leave that on, or how are you going to get it off without hurting your plant?
Yes, yeah.
So,
I tried them one year, and that was my problem. How do I get them off? But
yeah,
that's great. Well, we're
yeah,
ran out of time, but Priscilla, that was so much good
we
information, and
did
I
run out of
know
time.
everybody watching got a lot of out of that. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and may all your tomatoes ripen. Bye bye.
Great. Thank you. Bye.